Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 191. The Real Objective. Naturally, I can give you things far more valuable than this Xian core. Jun Moxie's voice was full of temptation. Jun Moxie obviously couldn't fulfill his words on his own, but as long as he had the Hongjun Pagoda to support him, he could give these people things far more valuable than they could ever imagine. Perhaps you've misunderstood us. We only came here in search of this condensed core, and not for money or anything similar. Long Crane looked at Jun Moxie with a hint of pain and disappointment. We're simply here for this condensed core. We don't intend on doing anything else. Jun Moxie was paying special attention to their words, and realized that these people were referring to the Xian core as condensed core, and he could sense that these two people considered these two things to be completely different from each other. Brother, don't you think that this guy is talking too much nonsense? Kid, just get out of here quickly. You're really pissing me off. Big Bear's eyes were glaring at Jun Moxie, otherwise, I'll beat you death. Your life is meaningless anyway, so we might as well use it for some enjoyment, huh? What do you say, third brother? Beat me to death? Are you sure that you're strong enough? Jun Moxie batted his eyelids as he spoke his words in a rather proud and self-confident manner. Although Jun Moxie was rather surprised that his bold attitude hadn't completely terrified this person, he knew well that he would need to continue with this charade anyway. Maybe not. Big Bear sincerely shook his head, and then puffed up his chest, but you certainly don't have the strength to kill me. Was I even talking to you? Did I say that I wish to kill you? Although I'll say this, I admire your strength just as you admire mine. Jun Moxie looked at that man in confusion. Big Bear, aren't you the fourth-born child? Yes, ah. How do you know? Big Bear scratched his head as he looked at Jun Moxie with a rather surprised expression on his face. Jun Moxie was left completely dumbstruck. How do I know? Your third brother just introduced you as his fourth brother, and you're still asking how I know. I thought you were just playing dumb, but I guess I was wrong. You really are as dumb as you sound. You really are the fourth idiot. Jun Moxie searched his belly and brain for a long time to find a better adjective, but wasn't very successful at it. How do you know my childhood name? Did the second brother tell you this? Have you met the second brother? Big Bear's eyes glared at Jun Moxie again. You've certainly met him, haven't you? Tell me, how do you know? And I'm warning you, don't call me by that name again. It really irritates me. I see. I guess I'll just call you Big Bear. Or Brother Bear. Jun Moxie decided to take the advice. That's more like it. Big Bear proudly shook his head. I prefer Big Bear, but I guess that Brother Bear isn't that bad a name either. Jun Moxie was at a complete loss of words. I've seen some reckless idiots before also, who just go about causing trouble. Take the Duga boys for example. They are quite stupid in their own merit, but I've never seen such a big fool in my entire life. You really are. You really are worth of being a legendary fool. Big Bear. Your stupidity is simply unfathomable. Jun Moxie seemed a bit tired now since he had been using his own chi to keep the Hongjun Pagoda in motion. If he stopped using his energy to keep the pagoda in motion, then these people would be able to sense his true strength. This would obviously not be good for Jun Moxie, and he might even end up in a lot of trouble since these two people were only entertaining him because he was coming across a very mysterious man at the moment. Who could emit the kind of energy they cherished the most? Please state your intentions clearly, sire. Long Crane was cautiously looking at Jun Moxie. Although he could intuitively feel that this mysterious man wasn't very strong, but he still found it rather strange that he was unable to sense the true extent of the man's strength. Moreover, this man's body was exuding a very delicious energy, the kind that no high-end Xian beast could resist. State my intention? Well, that's rather simple. I would like to trouble the two of you with a task. Jun Moxie decided to be straightforward rather than beating around the bush any longer. Ha ha ha. You'd like us to do something for you? Do you know who we are? Why do you think that will help you? Long Crane broke into laughter at first, and then continued in a mocking tone. Do you think that you can blackmail us into doing anything just because you have something that we desire? You, sire, are simply too naive. Just remind yourself that we actually managed to pilfer this condensed core from the solitary falcon and Shi Xiao very smoothly. And don't forget that they didn't even have the courage to chase after us. Do you really think that you're stronger than the solitary falcon and Shi Xiao? Stop acting like you're some super strong humans. You're just high-end Xian beasts. You may be able to deceive other people, but not me. And if you really weren't interested in what I have to offer, then you would not have come back. As far as grabbing that core is concerned, do you really think that you did it on your own? You might be strong enough to withstand a few attacks from Shi Xiao and the solitary falcon, but do you really believe that you would have gotten away as comfortably in case they genuinely engaged you in combat? Do you actually think that they were afraid of your individual strength? Jun Moxie's double-meaning tone was genuinely awe-inspiring. He seemed to be reminding them of their position but was somehow managing to do it without angering them. This mysterious duo had engaged several Spirit Xian and Sky Xian experts in the past, and had managed to get away with ease each time. However, they were both aware that their strength wasn't enough to compete against Shi Xiao and the solitary falcon at the same time. Even though their corporeal bodies were far more powerful, sturdier, and energetic than a normal Spirit Xian human being's body, but they knew well that it wouldn't be easy for them to contest against an actual Spirit Xian in a full-fledged fight. Even though their self-respect would force them to believe otherwise, these two top-notch Xian beasts were well aware of this fact, and couldn't help feeling at a complete loss for words at the moment. Jun Moxie obviously realized this simple fact, and decided against provoking them any further. Therefore, he simply laughed and said, "Since we can all benefit by helping each other, then why should we fight over such petty things? If the two of you feel that my conditions and offers are too harsh at the moment, then take some time and discuss the pros and cons of my offer for a while. Although you two are quite powerful already, but breaking past the next bottleneck won't be very easy for either of you anytime soon. I can help you with that. Especially when you consider the fact that the two of you are already at a very advanced stage. It will be very difficult for you to find someone with the knowledge and experience to help you make the next breakthrough. But I can provide you with all that. I can provide you with the things you need the most, and the things you lack, the things that are most scarce in this world. Isn't that a good thing for you? Strength is the most important thing in this world. If you're not strong enough, then your end will come sooner or later. Or perhaps you'll just end up fighting for a Xian core like this one like everyone else." Jun Moxie exposed an evil smile, although that time is still far away. But everyone in the Xian continent knows what happens with respect to a Xian beast's evolution. Once a beast reaches the peak of its present stage, it may or may not be able to advance any further, and once a Xian beast starts to age, his strength eventually degrades. And when that time comes, even an ordinary Spirit Xian expert could kill you in battle. Don't tell me, has the dark and gloom of the Tian Fa forest already erased the memory of the world outside it from your minds? Both these people started breathing heavily all of a sudden, And it seemed that Jun Xie's acidic words had already corroded down to the bottom of their hearts. Just think about it, the outside world is so beautiful, you won't have to worry about food or lodging. And just think about all the beautiful, beautiful women, and all those colorful things. As long as you are strong enough, you could have every pleasure that this world has to offer at your fingertips. Jun Xie continued to tempt them. Need I remind you of all the benefits you could get if you managed to evolve further? And in exchange, I only ask this one thing of you. My task may last a few days' time, but you'll get a lifetime of freedom and immense strength in return. Isn't that enough? Though your words make a lot of sense. But we have a habit. We don't take orders from the weak. So if you really wish to impress us, then show us that you're stronger than us. Else why would we need to take orders from you? Long Crane thought for a long while before replying, but his eyes seemed to be sparkling at this point. These two people were considered the king beasts inside the Tianfa forest. And such top-notch Xian beasts had their honor. So much so that they would never bow down to the weak even if they had an extreme desire or need of something that the weak had to offer in return for their submission. Ever since Jun Xie had realized that he could attract high-end Xian beasts to himself, and that he could even help a Xian beast in evolving further, he had started planning for this. His intention behind attracting the top-notch beasts from the Tianfa forest was simple. If he was able to attract the best and the most powerful beasts of the Tianfa forest to his side, then he wouldn't need to fear any power in this world. However, there was one other prerequisite. That is, he would need to find a way to make these beasts obey his orders. But only Yunbei Chen was powerful enough to command their strength. Jun Xie was well aware that he wasn't just trying to control an infant iron-winged panther anymore, but a dignified peak level 9 Xian beast. And therefore, he knew that he would need to plan everything very meticulously. In case even one flaw of his plan was exposed, then not only would he stand to lose his grip on these Xian beasts, but his own life may end up in a whole lot of danger. Therefore, the young Master Jun had carried out his plan very precisely. He had first spread the news about this Xian core across the whole continent to incite the interest of the various powers of this world in the hope that this news also reaches the ears such top-notch Xian beasts. In case so many powerful forces were to contest for a Xian core, then these beasts were also rather unlikely to sit back and watch. Jun Xie's first objective was obviously to improve his family's position before the starting of the war by weakening all hostile strengths. But he only had one ultimate objective, to attract the king beasts. And then tame them. He was well aware that he wouldn't have the strength to do just that, but felt that he could use the Hongjun Pagoda for support in this case. Even though he wasn't strong enough to do this on his own, but he still felt that his idea was justified. If I already have the strength of a spirit Xian experts, then what would I need these Xian beasts for? Therefore, Jun Xie had been training day and night ever since in order to strengthen his body enough to support the connection with the Hongjun Pagoda for prolonged periods of time. The additional mastery over the yin-yang escape law had allowed him to push things ahead of schedule. The reason he had asked Jun Wu Yi to find him some Xian core was simple. He needed to conduct some experiments in order to make the appropriate preparations. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 192. Cheating for Victory. However, Jun Xie was still holding back until he had at least broken past the bottleneck and into the second layer of the Hongjun Pagoda, since his strength would then be considered at par with that of an Earth Xian expert by the standards of the Xian continent. But before that time, the risk was simply too big. However, the Shui Han Manor's threat forced Jun Xie to proceed with his plan ahead of schedule. Although he still had some time to prepare himself, He impulsively decided to launch his plan even though it was still not ready for the execution phase. Perhaps this plan was the reason why Jun Moxie was prepared to boldly go up against the Shui Han manor. Of course, executing the plan at this stage would mean that the chances of success would be very less. But Jun Moxie decided to try anyway, because it was now or never. In case his plan didn't work as intended, then the Shui Han manor would destroy the Jun family anyway. As far as Jun Moxie was concerned, people die all the time. So what's the big deal? D****. Life is nothing more than just life. And there's really no need to attach so much value to it. However, the young Master Jun had never imagined that his plan would actually succeed. Not only was he able to attract the right number of spirit Xian experts, but he also managed to attract 2 of the 8 great masters of this world. Moreover, he was able to make them fight against each other, which was just as he had intended in his original plan. However, the biggest success that his plan had notched was 2 extremely powerful King Xian beasts received this news and arrived to compete for the Xian core. Nevertheless, Jun Moxie was still looking rather gloomy right now since he had somehow managed to attract 2 Xian beasts rather than 1 as per his plan. Moreover, not only were these beasts more powerful than his expectation, but they were also harder to tame than he had anticipated. As it stands, Jun Moxie's initial idea of tempting the Xian beasts into becoming his allies had already failed. He was well aware that his grandfather would kick his buttocks in case he ever found out that his grandson was planning on attempting such a feat after all. Jun Xie hadn't yet reached the spirit Xian realm yet. In fact, barely any of Jun Xie's followers were at par with him, let alone any higher. Even the most highly decorated and valiant generals of the Xian continent were below the spirit Xian realm. Although Jun Xie knew that such Xian beasts existed in the world, he also knew that they were extremely difficult to find. Such beasts were already at the peak of human possibilities, and were usually considered at par with the 8 great masters. Moreover, they mostly chose to spend their lives living in secrecy. These Xian beasts were known to have silenced the odd spirit Xian expert who had ventured out in search of them, hoping to seek their companionship. Therefore, it was only natural that no one knew who they were, and where they could be found. Another reason why Jun Moxie realized that his plan had failed was, Yun Bei Chen was the only man alive known to have such high-end Xian beasts as companions. In fact, it was rather evident now that these King Xian beasts had a very small, secretive and special circle, which seemed to have its own rules and regulations. This seemed to be the primary reason why even a man of Shi Changzhao's caliber was unable to identify Long Crane's true identity very easily, and had seemingly decided to abandon the Xian core rather than chasing after these 2 mysterious people. All in all, the young Master Jun had already realized a while ago that this plan of his was blindly optimistic from the beginning because he was simply aiming too high. Therefore, he had decided to adjust his plan in hope of securing the next best possibility. If I can't tempt them into becoming my partners, then I can at least tempt into doing just one task for me, right? Besides, they really can't refuse the reward I'm offering. However, he wasn't expecting to run into another snag here. Convince you of my strength? This is sheer D***MN nonsense. If I had enough strength to overpower you both, then why would I need to be afraid of Li Zhutian? I would have already gone up to his residence, knocked his head around like a ping-pong ball until that old man's eyes started to glitter like the stars, and then I would have stuffed his head up his own backside. Jun Moxie was silent, depressed, and at a complete loss at the moment. He could obviously see through Long Crane's plan. I know he's just trying to see if I can beat him and his brother, since it would mean that I'm not lying and that I'm actually powerful enough to offer them what they desire. As for my work, I'm sure that they can do it with ease. I never expected that a Xian beast could have such intelligence. Jun Xie was quite depressed and remained silent for a while. But then he decided that he need to take some initiative here. Impress you? How do you wish for me to impress you? Jun Xie was a bit impatient at this point. D*MN this. I'm exuding the best aura that you've ever seen and you're still chirping about. This is simply unbearable. Well, that's simple. You'll have to beat us in combat. Big Bear opened his hairy mouth while his face exposed a sinister expression. His facial expression was so simply and honest that Jun Xie immediately realized that the Xian beast was quite serious about the offer. What are you saying? Long Crane hastily berated his younger brother. You just go about shouting for a fight all day long. That's enough now. He looked at Jun Xie and thought, my brother simply doesn't know this guy's strength. In case this guy is actually as strong as Yunbei Chen, then wouldn't we also end up something like the second brother? And what if the two of us weren't able to escape away like the second brother did? Wouldn't we end up dead after the boss finds out? If he's strong enough, then he'll kill us. Else the boss will either way will die. We're all masters here. So let's not follow the usual way of the world. We'll play 3 games to determine the winner and the loser. Long Crane stretched out 3 fingers for Jun Xie to see clearly. Winning 2 out of these 3 tests will mark the winner. If you win, then we'll promise to do that one thing for you. However, if we win, we still get our reward. That's right. Even if you lose, we'll still get our reward. Even though we won't be helping you with your task. Big Bear repeated the final sentence. That is to say, Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 193. Preposterous. Well, so I win the first round? Jun Moxie deliberately asked the silently standing Long Crane. He had asked both the brothers to try and defeat him, and therefore it was important for the both of them to concede their defeat separately. Yes. We've lost. Long Crane reluctantly stated with difficulty. Although he was admiring Jun Moxie's shocking abilities, he could sense that his opposition clearly possessed some magical abilities, which meant that it would be extremely hard to win this competition since the other party's abilities would be hard to assess. I simply don't understand how this happened. Our speed and strength will be completely useless against this man's magical powers. Long Crane and Big Bear were both basically thinking the exact same thing at this point. Thank you for letting me win. Jun Moxie cupped his hands humbly. All right. The next one is yours to decide. I won't mind even if the both of you give the task a try. But we mind. How the hell are we supposed to come up with something that could possibly defeat you? The two people who were initially eager to celebrate their victory were now looking dismayed and doubtful. Jun Moxie's stunt had completely shocked them both. But moreover it had completely disoriented their plans and calculations. Long Crane and Big Bear pouted their lips after a while to hide their embarrassment. What can we possibly do against such a master? It seems that he'll beat us at anything. The two of them remained huddled close for a while, and continued to mutter in discussion, but the more they discussed, the less sure they became of their victory, and the less sure they were of their victory, the tighter their brows puckered out of tension. They continued to discuss for a long while, and then eventually fell silent, and just continued to stare at each other in dismay, unable to come up with a solution. It seems that this is going to take some time. Shall I go home and get some sleep first? Jun Moxie teased them. How dare you be so arrogant? I'm telling you. Big Bear opened his mouth in fury to curse out, but was unable to find the right words. He tried almost 5 or 6 times, but wasn't able to find the right selection of words. So what's it then? Jun Moxie decided to keep the pressure on them. I've had enough of you, you be ****. Big Bear burst into anger out of embarrassment. What's the hurry? Ha! Let me remind you that your present attitude isn't very noble. Jun Moxie's face suddenly became rigid. Did you just call me a ****? Fortunately Jun Moxie heard the second part of his sentence before bursting forth to procure some raw meat for a bear's paw soup. How long is this going to take? I reckon it will be dawn soon. You may have all the time in the world, but I have a lot of other things to do. Jun Moxie's voice suddenly started to rise in volume. Hurry up. I've already told you. Big Bear opened his mouth to hurl abuses at Jun Moxie again since he simply couldn't stand it anymore, but then suddenly ended up jumping up. A ring of halo emerged inside his brain, and he loudly roared out. I'll pee. What? The final words hit Jun Moxie's ears like a thunderbolt, and he almost fell to the ground. He dizzily looked at the big and burly man in front of his eyes, unable to fathom that this fierce killing machine would have actually uttered the word pee from his own mouth. Why is this guy talking like a 3-year-old all of a sudden? At this moment, Jun Moxie couldn't help but wonder if he had heard the word correctly. Long Crane was also startled for a second. But then his slender eyes started involuntarily revolving in circles, while his pupils started to dilate. You're telling me that you'll pee? Jun Moxie repeated the sentence, but his eyes were glaring questioningly at his opponent and it seemed that his brain wasn't willing to trust his ears. Correct. We'll pee. Big Bear's body language had suddenly become very confident ever since he had first said it. And it seemed as if the heavy burden which was suppressing him earlier had been lifted off. I would like to challenge you to a urination contest. How about it? This is what we want the second round to be. Do you wish to concede your defeat? Urination contest? How do you intend to decide the winner? By who urinates higher, farther, or more? Jun Wu Yi was barely able to find his words, and it seemed that his eyes would start spinning around in circle at any moment. A first-class spirit Xian expert has just challenged me to a urination contest. This may have been all right if we were all 3 years old. But most normal people are done with such activities after the age of 3, no one does this after they grow up. A full-grown man was standing in front of Jun Wu Yi, and was asking him to take out his equipment in front of everyone, and then use it to excrete his watery wastes. Do Xian beasts even know the meaning of the word shame? What is this? It seemed that Jun Wu Yi had underestimated the degree of shamelessness that certain people were capable of exhibiting. And to make matters worse, these people weren't even people, they were animals. Not higher, nor farther. These things are for children. We, however, are all qualified masters here, so we won't be playing such basic games. Big Bear groaned twice to clear his throat, but his face had already started to redden with embarrassment. And yet he tried to convince himself. We really can't lose to this man, even if he only requires us to do just one task. After all, who knows what he'll ask us to do? He's got some magical powers for sure, so his task definitely won't be very easy. D******. Anyway, not many people will see my shamelessness. So what do I need to be nervous about? As long as we win this contest, we at least won't have to do his work. You did an action which we both were incapable of doing, and therefore we readily conceded our defeat. Big Bear was struggling to maintain a straight face because he was afraid that relaxing his facial muscles would expose his embarrassment. Now I will do an action, and as long as you can imitate me, we will lose this one. If you cannot do it, then you'll lose. An action while urinating? Jun Wu Yi narrowed his eyes. Is there something special about this thing? This is something that we learn to do the moment we are born. Now that we've all grown up, we can all urinate with 2 hands, with 1 hand, and even if we hold our hands behind our backs, we can still urinate freely, comfortably, and smoothly. We can lie down and urinate. We can urinate while twisting our waist around in a circle, and we can even urinate while jumping up and down. Heck, we can even run around while taking a leak, and then we can make circles in the ground. And so on so forth. There's nothing really more to it. In case we urinate while squatting down, then it would be theoretically possible to direct it upwards and into our. Is that what you're up to? Because I'm definitely not doing that. Of course the action will be done while urinating. What else do you think I said? Big Bear opened his mouth and snapped back at Jun Wu Yi. Since you're the challenger, I'll go first. Jun Wu Yi simply couldn't bear to see it at first and closed his eyes. What's going on here? Do I really have to watch as he urinates? What does he think? Does he think that beautiful flowers will start growing in the Tianxiang city after he urinates here? Just as he was wondering what the action was going to be, Big Bear opened his mouth and exhaled a mouthful of air, and then stomped his burly feet on the ground with a thud, and then his burly body majestically flew upwards into the sky. The ease and speed of his movement was truly worthy of a spirit Xian expert's pride. Good skill. Jun Wu Yi silently muttered to himself in praise. However, his eyes were still staring on in confusion. Didn't this guy say he was going to pee? Is he going to pee from up there? Just as Jun Wu Yi was about to voice his doubt, Big Bear proudly opened his mouth and grinned as his hands quickly untied the waistband of his trouser while his body continued to rise up in the air. Then, he quickly inserted his hands into his trousers and nimbly pulled out his tool, shrugged it once, puffed his chest with air, and then exerted with all his strength. And sparkling water arrows surged outwards like a flooding yellow river, making chi sounds as they raced away from his body. Jun Moxie was left flabbergasted by the strong smell, and felt as if he'd faint at any second. On the other side, long cranes suddenly covered his face from shame. Big Bear's tall and burly body was still standing upright in the sky, while his eyes were seemingly staring at the horizon. He exerted more strength from his chest, and held his weapon steadily in both his hands, and slowly starting rotating, making his shiny water arrows spray out in all four directions. His fluids were spreading in all directions in equal volumes, and were notching the same distance as well. Big Bear's clothes were fluttering in the air in a rather magnanimous manner, well, minus his indecent parts. But the rest of the show seemed quite exquisite. Although his body was slowly drop in altitude, but the speed of his descent was almost negligible. Finally, the trajectory of the water jets slowly started contracting in range, and then eventually dried out. Then Big Bear comfortably shrugged his tool twice in the air, and then his hands swiftly stuffed his war weapon back into his trousers. Then, he leisurely took his time to tie his waistband into a bow knot. After he was done with his stunt, Big Bear leisurely descended down to the ground gracefully, and smilingly nodded in Jun Moxie's direction. I didn't have much to drink earlier. It genuinely seemed that Big Bear was regretting that he hadn't executed his action to perfection. Jun Moxie didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He was suddenly reminded of an incident from his previous life. A youngster had jumped onto the traffic police's podium at the cross-section of a busy crossroad, and had then flowed out his water jets in all directions unbridled, despite the traffic policeman's repeated warnings. But Jun Moxie had never expected that someone would actually be capable of paling that man's achievements into insignificance. This was obviously a very difficult task to perform. Jun Moxie was terrified out of his life at the thought of imitating this action. Big Bear tightened his belt, and triumphantly stated, "Boy, I've demonstrated it. Now it's your turn." Jun Moxie was left dumbstruck for a long while, and simply continued to stare at the face of this spirit strong Xian beast. Then he shook his head, sighed and said, "I concede my defeat." Please subscribe to this channel, so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 194. A taste of one's own medicine. I'm not trying to brag, but this isn't a child's play. Big Bear opened his mouth and bragged in high spirits. I admire you. That was excellent. I've sincerely conceived and conceded by defeat. Jun Moxie replied in an authentic and heartfelt tone. Jun Moxie had only conceded this round since he didn't have an option. Jun Moxie was a fairly shameless character in his own merit, but he knew that he wouldn't be capable of accomplishing a feat such as this one. Apart from being plainly shameless, Big Bear's stunt was also extremely difficult to master for a human being. If the task was to achieve a high altitude in the air and then urinate, then some people could master it with practice. But to urinate in the air while maintaining one's position, even Yunbei Chen would have given up on this task. This was a plainly physiological action. In order to maintain one's altitude in the sky, a person needs to constantly circulate their xian qi around his body. And by doing so, one's body turns rigid, irrespective of the person's innate strength. Although it's not difficult to revolve around in the sky, but one would need to relax every muscle of his body in order to urinate, which would make this task absolutely impossible. Because once a person relaxes his body's muscles, that man would immediately start falling to the ground. A bystander would ask, how was Big Bear able to pull off this action when even Yunbei Chen wouldn't have been able to? Does this mean that Big Bear is even stronger than Yunbei Chen? This feat had nothing to do with Big Bear's innate strength. The essence of this lay in the mere distinction between humans and Xian beasts. Powerful beasts such as Big Bear and his brother were gifted with a special talent or perhaps ability called stagnation. Xian beasts were capable of using this ability to freely venture into the sky at any time they wished to without using their Xian qi, whereas a human would need to employ his Xian qi to achieve the same. Therefore, in this regard, a Xian beast was undoubtedly far superior to a human. Moreover, Big Bear was already one of the strongest of his kind. In reality, Big Bear was not only the younger than his brothers, he was also the weakest one. But when it came to performing such a task to score a victory, Long Crane would have rather chosen to lose instead of doing such a shameless act in public. Which is why Big Bear had heroically taken the charge and had volunteered to perform the task. Of course, Big Bear's thick-skinned nature played a massive role in performing this task, but it also managed to bring his side back on level terms in one single swoop, leaving each side with one victory and one loss as it stood at present. Long Crane was standing with his back towards Jun Xie. His shoulders were already stooping low, and it seemed that he didn't even have the courage to stand and look Jun Xie in the eye. I wish I was dead. There can be no greater shame for a dignified beast from the Tian Fa forest. We actually resorted to unfair means to score a victory. Thankfully there are only 3 people present here. But the other party seems to be quite powerful in his own merit, and may know some very powerful people as well. In case he tells the world about my 4th brother's stunt, then it would be very humiliating for us, d*mn. Just how can I explain it to him that he mustn't tell the world about the manner in which we just won this round? Brother Crane, congratulations. Your 4th brother's mid-air stunt was really amazing, and I concede my defeat. Jun Xie had obviously sensed that Long Crane wasn't as thick-skinned as his younger brother, and decided to tease him for it. Obviously Jun Xie was just trying to vent out his gloom by doing this. After this glorious victory, I think that it's best that the winners of the 2nd round decide the final round's theme. So please, Brother Crane, decide the next round's task. Long Crane coughed twice to conceal his embarrassment, then gave Big Bear a ferocious glance before turning around to face Jun Xie, only to reveal his embarrassed face, and then smile unnaturally, and spoke in a weird tone, "Thank you, Brother Feng. You really have a very high tolerance, and thanks for giving us the chance to decide the next round." That's all right, brother. This was truly a good learning experience for me, and I honor my defeat. Jun Xie was barely able to utter the words, truly a good learning experience. In fact, it seemed that he would bite his lips shut at any moment. However, Jun Xie clearly knew that he wasn't as strong as Big Bear or his brother. And even though Jun Xie knew that Big Bear had cheated him in this round, he didn't refute it since he was also aware that he'd done the same in the previous round. He had just gotten a taste of his own medicine. Long Crane, on the other hand, was a proud personality, and had always carried himself with dignity. He would have rather resigned himself to losing this contest, but would have never resorted to using unfair means to win it. However, his reckless and shameless 4th brother had done exactly what he despised the most in the world, which had left him feeling very unpleasant inside. Firstly, he felt quite cheap for using such methods to secure a victory, and secondly, he felt sorry for his opponent, and thirdly, he needed this incident to stay a secret. And just then, Jun Moxie's offer to allow him to decide the third round had completely humbled him. The more he thought into it, the more ashamed he felt. Moreover, the fact that Jun Moxie had decided to concede the round without even attempting the task made things even worse for him. In fact, he had already started associating himself with Jun Moxie by now. Thank you, brother. The next one. Long Crane strained himself hard for a long time, but was unable to come up with anything suitable. This opponent was really giving him a headache. On top of that, the noble demeanor of the opposition was making him feel even guiltier inwardly. Moreover, his heart was carrying a faint feeling that the other side would be able to imitate any action that he could think of. Long Crane hadn't felt this way in a long time. In fact, this was only the second time in his entire life that he had ever felt this way. The first time was when he was faced with Yunbei Chen. As this thought crossed his mind, a burst of horror gripped Long Crane's heart. Is this man really capable of matching up to Yunbei Chen's mastery? Big Bear squeezed closer to his brother, covered his mouth, and said, "Third brother, haven't you already thought of it? It's very simple." Long Crane glared back at him, simply unwilling to entertain him any further. "So, have you thought of something?" Jun Moxie looked at them. "Yes." Big Bear opened his big mouth once again. "The next thing also involves peeing. Are you ready for it?" "Ah. Is there any limit to this guy's shamelessness?" His remark left both Jun Moxie and Long Crane staggering. There has to a limit to shamelessness, right? He's as shameless as an animal. No, even calling him an animal isn't enough to describe him. There really isn't a word despicable enough to describe this man. Have you already not died of shame yet? Long Crane started hurling abuses at his younger brother, and then impulsively kicked his brother's buttocks in rage. "You go and stand there on one side. Even if you don't have any sense of shame, your third brother still does." Big Bear pouted as he rubbed his buttocks, feeling wronged. "Third brother, you curse me in front of outsiders. Isn't that shameful for me? Don't I have my own pride? And in case you really wanted to kick me, you could have done that in person. This wasn't right." "Bah! What shame are you talking about? You've already ashamed yourself a long time ago." Long Crane continued to hurl abuses at his brother in resentment since his brother had been failing to meet his expectations and he was beginning to run out of patience now. "Roll over to one side. And don't you dare to open your mouth again. You obviously can't think of anything by yourself. So I came up with something and I even managed to win us the round. And you're still asking to keep shut." Big Bear muttered to himself as he bitterly took 2 steps to the side. "Actually, I don't think I have any problems with the fourth brother's suggestion. None at all. In fact, it would be fully in compliance with our agreement in case the fourth brother decides to carry out the same task more than once." Jun Moxie's face suddenly revealed a strange smile. "Ah." Long Crane couldn't prevent himself from exclaiming out loud, "Wouldn't you lose the round for certain if he did it again?" Big Bear opened his mouth once again. "Boy, don't you go about thinking that Big Bear has just peed once, so he won't be able to do it again. I have a large storage, so I can even go more than once without any issues." Big Bear wanted to continue with his sentence, but his words withered under Long Crane's angry glance. And he resigned to muttering to himself, "I was only talking for his good. He thinks he's too clever. So I just wanted to remind him that we're far superior." I don't doubt the fourth brother's words. But if we repeated the previous task in the exact same manner, then it would be rather dull and boring, wouldn't it? Therefore, I suggest that we change it around a bit. How about that? Long Crane thought about it and said, "We'd like to hear about the details." Jun Moxie smiled. "It's very simple. The fourth brother demonstrated that he can urinate in the sky, which means that it's easy for him to urinate both on the ground and in the sky. So how about we modify this task? And we urinate underground this time? Urinate underground? Big Bear opened his mouth once again. How's this even possible? A person would suffocate once they go underground. And how could you possibly release it if you're simply surrounded by soil and stone? Even if you're lucky enough to find a loose patch, how on earth would you be able to move about? What do you mean? Are you saying that you can't do it? Jun Moxie smiled. It is impossible to do this. They both shook their heads in unison. It's easy in the sky since there is a void. But inside the ground, that's simply impossible. Can you do it? What would you two say if I managed to do it? Jun Moxie hummed provocatively. I let you cheat me once. But this time it's my turn. Then we'll concede our defeat. They looked at each other and smiled. This is good for us. It seems that he's trying to make up for his defeat in the sky by doing it underground. But even the two of us can't accomplish such a task. So how could this guy? Right? This guy is so silly. Even if you manage to get inside the ground, you'd still have to loosen up. Try and find out for yourself, kid. Anyway, it seems like this kid is only trying to experiment with this task. It would be fun to see him fail at it. Since they both felt that their opponent was unsure about executing this task, they both immediately nodded and agreed for this action to be appointed as the third round's challenge without even discussing it any further amongst themselves. I'll go first. Jun Moxie raised his hands, and the two of them suddenly felt a strong aura in the air which they had been aching to get their hands on. They simply couldn't prevent themselves from inhaling its fervent and beautiful scent as they licked their lips, while their hearts itched to absorb it all. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 195. Fatally Enticing. Jun Moxie looked at the two of them as his feet slowly started sinking into the ground once again, and smiled in calm and relaxed manner. All of a sudden, Jun Moxie's body was partially submerged in the ground, with only his chest and head visible above the ground. The soil and the water had managed to retain their normal position on the ground's surface. Jun Moxie smiled once again, and then suddenly a jet of water projected outwards from the ground. The faces of the two Xian beasts instantly transformed to surprise and astonishment, and they immediately clutched their noses as they leapt sideways to avoid staining their clothes with Jun Moxie's urine. The shock in their eyes was clearly speaking for their mouths. He actually did it. It's obvious that this is a man's urine. There's no scope of fraud here. Jun Moxie pulled his body out once he was done emptying his tank, and asked, "What do you say now?" They looked at each other as dismal, and said, "You've done as you said, and we concede our defeat." Jun Moxie was greatly relieved to hear these words. Finally, I won. However, he was completely unaware that his opposition was also sharing the same sentiment, but in a reversed context. Yes, we finally lost. Even though the winner was forced to undergo several hardships, the losers were still eagerly hoping to lose the bet. Such bets are hard to come by. All right. What is it that you wish for us to do? Long Crane frowned as he spoke. Although we're willing to honor this bet, but I would like to remind you that we will only do just one task for you. In addition to this, you will not go back on your promise. We won't accept any excuses in case you go back on your promise. Naturally, as long as you complete my assignment, I'll reward you as promised. Jun Moxie smiled as he extended his hand towards Long Crane. Long Crane looked puzzlingly at Jun Moxie. but then slowly extended his hand and shook Jun Moxie's. Just as the two hands came in contact, Long Crane was suddenly startled and his entire body started to tremble. His face was reveling in an indescribably surprised expression, and then he gradually closed his eyes as he started to enjoy the sensation. A pure and unadulterated aura was streaming from Jun Moxie's hands and into Long Crane's body via his hands. And all of a sudden, Long Crane felt as if he was walking in a heavenly paradise. Each meridian of his body, every inch of his bone, and every strand of his muscles was relishing this sensation. The Xian Qi, which had been dormant for a long time, had suddenly started burst into action in an unprecedented manner. And Long Crane could sense that as long as this aura continued to circulate around his body, he could easily break past the next bottleneck. Wave after wave of this pure aura had left him completely intoxicated. Good heavens! I never knew such a sensation could exist in the world. I'll complete as many tasks as he assigns for me. Long Crane had always been a calm and composed personality, but against his nature, his entire body was trembled in excitement at this moment. I've never felt this kind of energy inside my body in years. Just thinking about it brings tears to my eyes. I haven't been able to break through the bottleneck for a long time now, and I only have about 30 more years at most before my cultivation starts to slip from its peak. Had I met him later in life, then it might have been too late to upgrade my cultivation. Big Bear was looking dumbstruck at his brother. What is the third brother doing? What's so mesmerizing about holding his hand? Long Crane could sense that his cultivation was slowly inching towards its peak. And then suddenly this mysterious aura stopped, just when he was about to reach the point of its need. This break in aura almost drove him crazy for 1 second. Jun Moxie had suddenly withdrawn his hand, and was now smiling at him. Jun Moxie opened his mouth and spoke in a calm voice. Are you convinced now that I can help you as promised? At this point, Long Crane's heart was aching to grab Jun Moxie's hand and feed more aura into his own body, but Long Crane was too proud to stoop to such desperation, and so he breathed deeply a few times in order to calm himself down, while his eyes remained shut the entire time. Then, he opened his eyes and spoke up, but the traces of excitement were still lingering in his trembling voice. Yes, I'm convinced. I'm afraid that no Xian beast could ever be capable of resisting this temptation. For us, this temptation can be fatally enticing. Big Bear was still eyeing Jun Moxie doubtfully, which is why Jun Moxie smiled and extended his hand towards him as well, and startled him in the same manner. However, Big Bear didn't close his eyes as his elder brother had, and instead started staring at Jun Moxie as if the man was a celestial being. Big Bear tightened his paws around Jun Moxie's hand, and it seemed as if he wouldn't let it go for the life of him. In fact, he almost started begging, give me a little please, give me a little. Hurry, hurry, give me a little more of it. I really need this. This stout and burly beast with a body almost 3 times the size of an ordinary man's had suddenly started acting like a naughty child who was unwilling to part with his favorite candy. Jun Moxie tried to pull his hand back, but found it stuck. He tried to pull harder, but Big Bear only gripped it ever more firmly, simply unwilling to let go, while constantly begging for more, leaving Jun Moxie to regret taking the extra initiative of convincing him as well. Fourth brother. Long Crane berated his brother again, stop acting like this. Act like the dignified Xian beast you are. Why are you acting so anxiously? We haven't discussed the terms of appointment yet. How can I not be anxious? Big Bear glared back at his brother. The anxiety of his heart was clearly visible in the pumped-up veins of his eyes. I've been trapped at my current stage for close to 20 years now. Each day passes like a year for me. Ah. You get back here. And shut up. Sire. What is it that you wish for us to do? What task could you possibly be incapable of accomplishing with your own supernatural abilities? Long Crane pulled his brother back with one hand and asked in an urgent and pressing tone. Although I'm capable of doing this task on my own, but for reasons I cannot state, I won't. Else I wouldn't be offering you this reward. Jun Moxie started to build up to his task in an unhurried and casual manner. Oh. Just say it quickly. We can do anything for that reward. You can't just give us a taste of that sweet energy and take it away. It's making me really desperate. Big Bear was practically jumping around Long Crane in the hope of breaking free of his brother's grip. Ask us anything. We'll do anything for you. Recently, the masterly Zhu Tian has been giving me some trouble. And it disgusts me. Jun Moxie stated. Paying special attention to their facial reactions, you need to kill him. What? Is this a joke? Long Crane and Big Bear suddenly cried out at the same time once. And then both of them fell silent. This is the second most powerful man in the world we're talking about. And this guy is talking like it's. That man is almost as strong as Yunbei Chen. And in case we actually had enough strength to kill him, then wouldn't we have killed Yunbei Chen when we faced him that one time? Ah? Li Ju Tian, he says that name like he's your next-door spirit Xian neighbor. Find Li Ju Tian. And kill him. Jun Moxie repeated the assignment. You think that's going to be like killing a chicken? Ah? Is this guy playing with us? Does he really think that it's that simple? Why don't you just ask us to go into the sky and then bring you the moon or a star? Ha! I reckon that even if our eldest brother, our boss personally attacked Li Ju Tian, then even he could only go as farther as defeating Li Ju Tian at best. But even he won't be able to kill that man. There's only one way of killing Li Ju Tian. We'd have to fabricate a situation where Li Ju Tian would have no means of escaping away. And then we'd have to attack him with our eldest brother in support. That's the only way it's possible. Even if we were somehow able to stage this advantage in our favor, I still reckon that at least one out of us 3 brothers will end up getting buried beside Li Ju Tian's body. You're asking us to risk our lives in this deal. No. You're practically asking for our lives. What happened? If there's some sort of an issue, then please tell me. Ah. Jun Moxie looked at the two of them as he asked in a tone of surprise. This isn't just another difficult task, it's an impossible one. Big Bear cleared his throat twice before speaking up. Did you really just ask us to kill Li Ju Tian? You think that's like slaughtering cattle or pigs? Ah. Bah. Just say it. And he's dead? What's to be done in that case? The Shui Hun Manor is my only problem at the moment. And why would I ask you to do a task that I can get anyone else to do? If my task was that easy, then why would I come up with this kind of a reward in exchange? Jun Moxie stretched his hands at chest level and looked helplessly at the two of them. Since you can't do my task, then I'm afraid that this contract is null and void. I guess I'll just have to deal with Li Ju Tian on my own. It will take me a few days extra. And I'll have to get my hands dirty. But I'll do it on my own, I suppose. What? The deal is over? No. We can't let you scrap this deal. If you hadn't given us a taste of that aura, then we ourselves would have scraped this deal. But now we simply cannot allow that to happen. Had Big Bear not been afraid of this man's hidden abilities, then he would have already tried to use force. Hold on a minute. Long Crane raised his hand and spoke up in a keen tone. You just said that your troubles were provoked by Shui Hun Manor, and not Li Ju Tian himself. Am I right? Long Crane finally grasped his focus again, and suddenly became excited all over again. The heavens never bar a good man's way. The two of them cried out at the same time. We would have regretted losing this opportunity for the rest of our lives. But it seems that we might just be able to turn things for the better here. I didn't understand your words properly. The Shui Han Manor and Li Ju Tian are associated, aren't they? That makes them one or the same thing. So what's the difference between the two? Jun Moxie's tone was exceptionally calm, almost as if it was some minor detail he didn't really care about. No, that's not the same thing. Big Bear exploded in excitement. Li Ju Tian is a perennial wanderer and doesn't really live with the Shui Han Manor. In fact, he barely comes back once a year. How could you consider them to be one and the same? There's no issue with the task as long this doesn't involve Li Ju Tian. If it's just the Shui Han Manor you want dead, then we'll kill them off with ease. Is that so? If killing Li Ju Tian isn't necessary to do away with the Shui Han Manor, then there's no need to kill Li Ju Tian. Jun Moxie continued in a puzzled tone and patted his forehead. I was almost getting ready to kill the wrong person. Both the brothers rolled up with eyes in contempt. Almost getting ready to kill the wrong person? You think you can kill Li Ju Tian that easily? You almost scared the life out of us there. If you only wish to deal with the Shui Han Manor, then we can handle your task with ease. Long Crane smiled responsibly, although Shui Han Manor has several spirit Xian experts. But that won't pose any problems for us. It's like my fourth brother said, we'll finish them off with ease. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 196. Let's do it like this. That's all good. But I have to take step back here. The target has now changed to Shui Han Manor instead of Li Ju Tian, and this reduces the task's difficulty but a few grades. Therefore it seems to me that the reward I was previously offering is now too much. Jun Moxie puckered his brows tightly, seemingly wishing to go back on his word since it seemed as if he'd overpaid for this bargain. Brother, you mustn't go back on the terms. The Shui Han Manor is considered the second strongest force of this continent. Don't you think that it's enough? This will be too big a task for anyone else other than us. Even though Big Bear was prompt to reply, his words still sounded very sincere. Please don't think that destroying the Shui Han Manor will be an easy task. Firstly, destroying the Shui Han Manor will provoke the wrath of Li Ju Tian. And secondly, if we destroy the Shui Han Manor, then won't it solve your problems with them? The two of us will also have to pay a considerable price for it. My fourth brother is right. Even though the Shui Han Manor is considered weaker than the Silver Blizzard City, it is only so because Li Ju Tian is always away from the Shui Han Manor, whereas Han Feng Shui is always inside the Silver Blizzard City. If you take these two masters out of the equation, then these two powers are neck to neck in terms of their strength and influence. Long Crane added. If that's the case, then let's do it like this. Jun Moxie wrinkled his brows together, still unwilling to settle for the current deal. However, it still seems that I'm taking a bit of a loss in this deal, so I'd like to attach an additional request. And I'd insist that you complete this request as well. Otherwise I'd consider this deal over. Please express your request. As long as you don't require us to kill Li Ju Tian, we'd be willing to do one more task for you in addition to destroying the Shui Han Manor. Seeing Jun Moxie losing interest in the deal, Big Bear hastily made the commitment. Li Ju Tian has a son, Li Tingyun. He's even more annoying than Li Ju Tian himself. This person must be taught a good lesson. And if possible, I'd like him dead as well. Jun Moxie exposed a sinister smile. Of course. I'd like him castrated one way or the other. That's simply out of question. They both spoke up in unison. Li Ju Tian fathered that boy after the age of 80. And he also happens to be Li Ju Tian's only child. In case we kill him or even castrate him, then it would be tantamount to depriving Li Ju Tian of his bloodline. I'm afraid that Li Ju Tian will never forgive the Tian Fa forest for it, and will have to pay this debt with our blood for generations to come, and this is one consequence we simply cannot afford to bear. Long Crane explained. If this isn't going to work, then how do we go about it? Jun Moxie seemed to be losing his temper at this point. Besides, if Li Ju Tian can father a son at the age of 80, then I'm sure that he can father another at the age of 100 as well. So why are you so worried about it? He became the laughing stock of the world when he fathered a child at the age of 80. And in case he has to father another at the age of 100, then I'm afraid that he'll die of the shame this world will instill on him for it. Big Bear shook his head regretfully. Long Crane decided to walk the road of sensibility once again. This request is too difficult to complete since this request is the same as annihilating Li Ju Tian's bloodline. However, if your purpose is only to teach Li Tengyun a lesson, then we could perhaps beat up the boy very severely on your behalf. In fact, we'll make sure that he's rendered incapable of getting out of his bed for more than a year if you wish it. How about that? Long Crane thought about it for a moment, came up with a compromise, and then said, however, if you insist on kill the boy, then I'm afraid that we'll have to back away from this assignment altogether. The 8 great masters are very selfish people by nature, and apart from Yunbei Chen, all the others seem to hate each other. Unless they see a personal gain, they don't even try to help each other out of grave situations. In reality, even attacking the Shui Han Manor would push this peace we currently have to its limit. I'm sure your distinguished self can understand the limitations of our position. If you can guarantee that you'll wreak havoc on the Shui Han Manor, and moreover, you'll break Li Tengyun's legs, both of them, and ensure that he isn't even able to crawl around for a year's time, then we can consider this deal reached. Jun Moxie decided to act flexibly in order to take advantage of this situation. Long Crane and Big Bear discussed the proposal for a while, and then replied, in that case, we have a deal. We have a deal. Jun Moxie smiled, and stretched out his hand. Let's shake hands and swear it. Clap, they joined their palms together, indicating that they had agreed on terms. Long Crane and Big Bear were both quite excited. If we can trade this task for an opportunity to evolve our state, then it's a good deal for us. We're getting a really good deal here considering that we don't even have to kill Li Ju Tian, or his son, and we only have to weaken and destroy the Shui Han Manor's strength. Just the thought of living several years of their life in a free and leisurely manner post their evolution was enough to tickle their imaginations. If we are able to progress again, then our strengths will reach at par with the eldest brother, and then we won't even have to fear the 8 great masters. Jun Moxie was excited as his partners. A near negligible use of the Hongjun Pagoda's energy in exchange for this assignment's competition would immediately solve all problems surrounding Guan Qinghan, and would delay his troubles for at least half a year's time. This is a very cost-effective deal. I just got lucky here. I suppose that 1 month's time should be enough to settle this matter. What do you say about that? Jun Moxie stated hastily at first, but then controlled himself since he realized that he might end up revealing too much information in his excitement. That's not an issue. Long Crane and Big Bear replied back anxiously as they smiled. A month's time for this task is a lot of time. This is simply too much time considering our strength. Haha. Brother Feng, how do we find you after the matter is resolved? Long Crane finally raised the issue in a subtle and calm manner. You can seek out the Jun family's residence in the Tianxiang city, and then you may inform Jun Wu Yi that the Shui Han Manor has been dismantled as per requirement. Then, you can wait a moment. and I'll meet you again to honor my promise. Jun Moxie solemnly vowed. I finally have a way to take care of the Shui Hun Manor and the Silver Blizzard City, even if it's only a temporary solution. I'll wait a month. And once they return, I'll talk about the Silver Blizzard City's task then. Hee hee. Jun Moxie chuckled treacherously within his belly. We'll take our leave, brother. Until next time. Long Crane raised his hand to wave goodbye and pulled Big Bear along with him with his other hand. One moment. I have one thing that I'd like to ask the two of you about. Something came up in Jun Moxie's mind and he suddenly stopped the two of them again. The peak level 9 Xian core. What's its use? The two brothers immediately stopped in their tracks, turned around, and continued to stare him for a long time before Big Bear finally asked, Why do you ask this? Don't mean that you don't actually know what this Xian core is for? After seeing my abilities, do you really think that I need that Xian core? However, since you look so excited after winning it over, I just thought I'd ask you this question. If you don't wish to discuss it, then I'll take my leave. Jun Moxie was a bit surprised that these two brothers were very cautious in this regard, and couldn't help regretting asking this question. That's also true, given the purity of the energy inside your body. This Xian core is useless for you. Naturally, you wouldn't be aware of its usage either. It sounded from Long Crane's voice that he envied Jun Moxie's ability. Why would this guy need a Xian core if his own body can produce such pure aura? Moreover, it's fairly difficult to assess his strength, but I reckon that he could be as strong as Yunbei Chen. A man of such strength and ability naturally won't be bothered enough about these Xian cores to figure out its usage. Long Crane and Big Bear were thinking the same thing, and it seemed that these two brothers had suddenly started feeling humble in front of Jun Moxie's abilities. As this thought crossed their mind, Long Crane smiled and said, I guess, telling you this will be of no harm to us. What the human race calls a Xian core is known in our race by another name, condensed core, and it also considered one of the most miraculous things known to our race since it's the crystallized essence of our life. However, if a human uses it in the wrong manner, then even a spirit Xian expert wouldn't be able to prevent his body from exploding to fragments. In order to use this core, one would first need to stabilize its energy with a heavenly star grass, and would also need to use a tricolored rasher mushroom along with 9 Xian roots for support. And only then would a spirit Xian expert be able to use this Xian core to increase his energy and cultivation level. However, once the core is ready, it can enhance a human's cultivation overnight, and the user would see a tremendous progress. However, all this one aspect, but getting those 3 herbs is another. These 3 herbs are almost a myth, and even a spirit Xian expert is unlikely to be able to find them all. Long Crane laughed to ridicule. Why is mankind so selfish? Is that so? Oh, that's really strange. People are willing to go to all this trouble of beating each other to death for something that may not even be possible at the end of the day. It really surprises me. Why would they even bother with it? Jun Moxie seemed at a loss. The greed of humanity is the most terrible thing staining this world. The two brothers felt the same way on the subject, and nodded in agreement, thoroughly impressed by Jun Moxie's words. The 3 men cupped their hands in unison to mark their parting salutation, and then the silhouettes of the 2 brothers darted away and faded into the horizon as Jun Moxie watched. It was evident from the velocity of their departure that these 2 Xian beasts simply couldn't wait to finish this task. The storm had already come to a stop, and the dawn was almost upon the sky. Jun Moxie inhaled a deep breath to relax his mind, and then simply slammed down to the ground. He could distinctly feel the ache in his head. Jun Moxie had completely exhausted his entire mental and physical energy a long while ago, and had been reluctantly pushing himself further the entire night for the fear that Long Crane and Big Bear would sense his true strength in case he broke the connection with the Hongjun Pagoda, which would make things very difficult for him. However, the result of this hard-earned victory was beyond Jun Moxie's imagination. Although the plan hadn't gone as smoothly as intended, but in one single swoop, he had managed to resolve the issue surrounding the Xian core as well as the Shui Han manor, which could be considered a great result for Jun Moxie. Since Long Crane and Big Bear had agreed to beat up Li Tingyun, it could be estimated that the threat from the Shui Han manor would end up being delayed by at least another 6 months. Jun Moxie could use these 6 months to promote the strength of the Jun family. And even if the Shui Han manor came attacking in full force at that time, the Jun family would actually be capable of fighting back. In fact, Jun Moxie was looking forward to it. How can one improve if there's no opponent? Pressure is the best stimulant for progress. Once the Jun family was ready for war, and the Shui Han manor was to back away, then Jun Moxie would himself go knocking on their door. If you dare to claim a Jun woman, then you better have the guts to fight over her. Whatever I do, I won't let Li Tingyun get away with this. Silver Blizzard City, Shui Han Manor. Haven't you guys been too arrogant for a long while now? Jun Moxie gritted his teeth and sat up on the ground. Then he slowly pulled himself up and merrily dragged his tired and aching body along the road, and towards to his house. Please subscribe to this channel, so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 197. Jun Wu Yi loses his temper. Jun Moxie slept through the day. The amount of energy which he had previously expended had put his body under a lot of strain, and had pushed him way beyond his limits. In fact, the hitman had never pushed himself to such limits ever in the past. Jun Moxie had been forced to continue using his energy to simulate the Hongjun Pagoda until he had sent the 2 Xian beasts away on their task, and had only loosened up thereafter. However, since he was afraid that someone might still be spying on him, the hitman hadn't completely lowered his guard out of a necessity. And if it hadn't been for the training he had received in his previous incarnation, the young Master Jun might have actually collapsed to the ground before reaching the Jun residence. However, by the time he reached the Jun residence, the young Master Jun was completely exhausted. So much so that he had already pushed his body to a limit where he didn't even have the strength to lift his finger. The last thing he remembered was the guard lifting him up and carrying him to his bed, post which he had no recollection of anything. Little Ko had been so worried the entire night that even she hadn't been able to sleep a wink. And then later in the morning, Jun Wu Yi had joined her in the courtyard, clearly realizing that something major had happened, and was rather worried that his nephew might have participated in a life-threatening activity. Jun Wu Yi spent the entire day in sitting in his wheelchair inside Jun Moxie's little courtyard, his face clearly reflecting the worries of his heart. Jun Moxie said something before he passed out, but what did his words mean? The Shui Han manor, they won't be a problem for the time being. Why won't the Shui Han manor be a problem for now? Why is everything all right? He left moments after we found about this problem with the Shui Han manor. Why? Given the reputation of the Shui Han manor, this couldn't possibly be a big joke or something, right? That would simply be ridiculous given the imposing manner in which they operate, right? To tell the truth, even though Jun Wu Yi had imposingly and proudly decided to protect his deceased nephew's widow against the might of the Shui Han manor, he still feared the unseen difficulties and the dangers that lay ahead. In reality, Jun Wu Yi wasn't afraid of the Shui Han manor itself, but he feared the organization's backer, Li Ju Tian, the second strongest man alive. He was well aware that the Jun family simply couldn't afford to wage a war against that man. Their current conflict with the Silver Blizzard City and its master Han Feng Shui had left the Jun family in a difficult situation, and had pushed them to a point where they simply couldn't afford another enemy of the same caliber and influence. Previously, when the news surrounding the peak level 9 Xian Core's appearance had reached his ears, Jun Wu Yi had initially thought of putting on a mask and venturing out to try his luck. In case he was able to win over the Xian Core by a fluke, then he could possibly enhance his cultivation to the spirit Xian realm with the Xian Core's assistance. And even though it wouldn't be sufficient to compete against a man like Li Jutian, it would still give the Jun family a better chance of making a stronger stand. After this thought had initially crossed his mind, Jun Wu Yi had cleared his mind to make a better assessment before rushing into action, and had realized that the strength of the individuals competing for this Xian Core was far beyond his ability to match up. And in case he was met with a misfortune seeking this treasure, then the Jun family simply wouldn't be able to withstand the loss. And then the next morning, his baby nephew had suddenly uttered, "The Shui Han Manor. They won't be a problem for the time being." This sentence had left Jun Wu Yi both happy and scared. Jun Wu Yi didn't doubt the authenticity of the information because he knew that his nephew possessed some remarkable abilities which had been surprising him a lot lately, and had been bringing him a lot of joy as well. However, even though he didn't doubt it, he still couldn't help feeling amazed by it. How did my nephew manage this? The other side is backed by Li Jutian. This is really amazing. Guan Qinghan had also come up to Jun Moxie's courtyard several times after hearing Jun Moxie's words via Jun Wu Yi, but hadn't disturbed her brother-in-law since she could see that he was extremely exhausted, but couldn't prevent her eyes from becoming numb with tears. She could sense that Jun Moxie had undertaken a lot of strain to protect her from harm, and although she had no reason to believe why Jun Moxie was so sure about it, but for reasons unknown, Qing Han chose to trust Jun Moxie. She simply couldn't forget the words that had come out of Jun Moxie's mouth, "If the power of the Jun family cannot protect her, then before the Jun family is destroyed, I will personally kill her. I will never allow her to be married into the Shui Han manor." Such cruel and cold-blooded words had only filled her heart with a sense of happiness and security. As far as she was concerned, these words weren't cruel or cold-blooded, but that of a man who was determined to defend her to the point of risking his own life for her honor. Guan Qinghan was quietly standing in her courtyard, staring at the drifting cloud over the horizon, trying to recall the many events of these last 2 days. Several thoughts and images were gushing about her mind, leaving her completely confused, and it was rather difficult to guess her thoughts at this point. The evening lamps had already been lit by the time Jun Moxie finally woke up. "You've finally woken up." Jun Wu Yi didn't even bothering taking a look, and simply charged inside his nephew's room when he heard a slight movement on the bed. "Third uncle, what are you doing here? How long was I asleep?" Jun Moxie's eyes remained closed for a while, and he groaned once before he finally opened them and sat up. Then, he shook his head since that biting pain of the previous night had already vanished, and had instead been replaced by a warm and comfortable feeling, almost as if his entire body was soaked in warm water. He felt strangely comfortable, while his meridians seemed strengthened, sturdy, and at peace. This was a very different sensation when compared to his past experiences. Even though his body's physical resistance was much higher, but whenever the hitman Jun was forced to push himself to the limits in order to conclude an assignment, he would have to endure a headache for days at a stretch since his body would require a few days' time to recuperate after such extreme exhaustion. However, this time, the result was completely different. Although overexerting his Xian Qi was a dangerous process and resulted in extreme fatigue, But the link between his own body's energy and the Hongjun Pagoda was more closely associated than he had presumed. And for some reason the Hongjun Pagoda had not only repaired his body's fatigue, but had also left him feeling a strange and subtle sensation, as if he was reaching close to the threshold of the second layer. Jun Moxie's heart was carrying this strange feeling as if he would be capable of making the breakthrough to second layer of the art of unlocking the heaven's fortune in 2 or 3 days' time, which would also mean that he could successfully unlock the second layer of the Hongjun Pagoda. This feel was undoubtedly very mysterious. And Jun Moxie simply didn't know why he was feeling this, but it seemed that this feeling was real. But there was no reason behind it. You left this time. And then you returned half dead. How do you expect me to not worry? Jun Wu Yi flared up his nostrils. You've caused 6 big troubles these last few times you've gone out. The first time, you managed to land in the middle of an assassination attempt on the princess. And you injured yourself very severely. The second, you actually ventured into the magnificent jewel hall to casually play around. The third time you were with me, and you managed to cause a massacre inside the Donghua hall. And then the fourth, you ran amok the Ni Chang pavilion, and you rained curses on the second prince. Then, the fifth, you almost got yourself assassinated. And now this is the 6th one. You've returned half dead. And from what the guards tell me, they had to carry you back. And were afraid that we would have to hospitalize you in case you didn't get up soon enough. Jun Wu Yi stretched out his finger while his face reveled in his frustration. Jun Moxie, didn't your third uncle say that you must be accompanied by guards when you leave the house? You can get away from your guards whenever you wish to. And I know I can't even blame them for it given your skills. But these people have ordered to follow and protect you. Don't you think they would have been worried? Even if you're the young master of this family, that doesn't mean that you have the right to worry anyone you feel like. So why did you cause so much tension? Jun Wu Yi practically growled. Do I have to keep a check on you every time you leave? Last night, you vanished in the heavy rains. And then when the guards opened the door early morning, they find you damned be asterisk starred wasted on the doorstep, crawling around in the mud. Jun Moxie scratched his nose and giggled twice as he continued to respectfully listen to his uncle's rebuke. Jun Wu Yi was usually the calmer one amongst his family members, but today the man was on fire. Therefore, Jun Moxie didn't dare to argue, and continued to listen quietly with a babyishly innocent look on his face. I had gone out to take care of some shady business, so how could I allow these people to follow me around? Jun Wu Yi took a deep breath in an attempt to regain his composure since he felt that he had already overdone it a bit. Anyway, given the innocent look that Jun Moxie was covering his face with, Jun Wu Yi could sense that his temper was misplaced. I'm too lazy to scold you right now. And anyway, it's a pure waste of my energy. Jun Wu Yi waved his hand. Well, you said something this morning. What did you mean? Jun Wu Yi had spent the entire night listening about the horrifying battle which was taking place in the city, and naturally couldn't help but worry about his nephew's safety, which was the reason he had lost his temper. Ah? What did I say? What are you talking about? What meaning? Jun Moxie simply had no recollection of anything. He wasn't just pretending. He had spoken those words right before he had fainted, and therefore had no recollection of it. Are you playing around with me? Jun Wu Yi's anger started flaring up again. The Shui Hun manner. They won't be a problem for the time being. You yourself said it. Now what did you mean? Ah, that one. Jun Moxie's eyes turned around sharply. If I tell Uncle that I was out dealing with 2 of the 8 great master, and 4 other spirit Xian experts, plus 20 sky Xian experts and a few hundred earth Xian experts, and then went about striking a deal with 2 Tian Fa Xian beasts, wouldn't Uncle faint from the shock? I reckon that even if Uncle has enough nerve to withstand the shock, his legs still won't stop shaking from fear for a while, and he's supposed to a cripple with no sensation in his legs. However, I simply cannot keep this a secret from him. It seems that I'll have to figure out an indirect method of telling him this. I estimated it. Well, I guessed it. Jun Moxie braced himself for it as he calmly stated with a smile. You estimated it? No, wait. You guessed it? Is this something to make a guess at? Jun Wu Yi's expression changed to that of ridicule as he endorsed last night's activities. Last night, a large number of the world's strongest experts assembled together in the Tianxiang city, and then engaged each other in a battle. It is reported that 2 of the 8 great masters, Shi Changxiao and the solitary falcon, were also involved in this fight. In addition to this, the Yutang Empire's imperial teacher, Fei Mengchen, was also there along with the 3rd, the 6th, and 9th elder of the Silver Blizzard City, in addition to several other powerful experts. In addition to this, the Li family's Li Yuran had also invited his master, Li Wubei's top 10 disciples to participate in this fray. And then 2 of the Tian Fa forest's legendary beasts also showed up at this scene. The reason behind all this is rumored to be an unknown masked man, who appeared at this scene with that peak level 9 Xian core, which had been stolen some time ago, and ended up causing this contention. At present, the Xian core is confirmed to be in the hands of those 2 Tian Fa Xian beasts. Jun Wu Yi seemed rather familiar with everything that had happened last night. Well, almost everything. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 198. Wu Hui's Cenotaph. Sweat drops had already started falling off from Jun Moxie's forehead, and he was barely able to force a smile on his face. Third uncle, your intelligence network is so amazing. So there would have been no reason for you to personally go there, right? Since so many experts had arrived, I naturally had to go and see it for myself. Jun Wu Yi snapped loudly. This, after all, happened on my Tianxiang country's land, and this obviously would have alerted His Majesty. In case His Majesty ordered a thorough investigation into the matter and I didn't have any information on the subject, then the Jun family would be deemed as ignorant. His luminous eyes looked at Jun Moxie. These things aren't important. The only thing that is important, and the only thing that I wish to know about, is that, who was that masked man who stole this Xian core and then appeared publicly last night? That damned B***** was the reason behind this commotion last night. And I want to know his identity. Must be some legendary expert. I can only guess that such an expert would be at least comparable to Yun Beichen. Otherwise he would have never attempted such a feat. Jun Moxie stated solemnly in a serious tone. Really? Jun Wu Yi's expression resembled that of a dormant volcano simply waiting to erupt. I gave you a level 6 Xian core a few days ago. Bring it out. I want to take a look at it. That Xian core is now lying in the hands of Long Crane. So how can I bring it out? It's not like I can create something out of thin air. A mere 6th level Xian core. Jun Moxie's eyes were turning and twisting. I lost it. You didn't lose it to a couple of extremely powerful Xian beasts from the Tian Fa forests, did you? Jun Wu Yi glared at his nephew. Now that you've properly woken up, I have a bucket of questions that I wish to ask you. And you should know that there is penalty waiting for you in case you give me a bucket of lies in return. Jun Moxie. Your third uncle is older than you and more experienced as well. I don't know why you're so sure about what you said last night. Nor do I know how you managed to pull it off. And I don't even know how you managed to fool those people. However, I know that you will not lie to me. But Jun Wu Yi spoke his words slowly in a calm tone. in the face of disaster. With fear and trepidation gripping his body, Jun Moxie quietly got out of his bed. Uncle, I had a major urinary emergency. And I really needed to. You couldn't hold your urine in your pants? Bullshit. Jun Wu Yi roared out. Jun Moxie obediently stayed rooted to his spot as Jun Wu Yi went on to say, I suppose it's time to give you the family's trademark punishment. Guan Qinghan was anxiously walking around in Jun Moxie's yard since she had already been informed that third uncle had gone into Jun Moxie's room just after he had woken up. Although Jun Moxie was her younger brother-in-law, but this was still a young man's bedroom at the end of the day, and therefore she naturally felt embarrassed at the thought of rushing in without permission. Therefore, left with no other option, she was anxiously waiting in the courtyard when she started hearing the sounds of Jun Wu Yi's roars, and couldn't help getting nervous and worried. Why is third uncle so furious? This was only a small incident. Just as she was busy worrying. Bang! A stack of white clothes flew out from the room, and Qing Han subconsciously got up and almost fell to the ground under the fierce momentum of this flying object which she tried to catch. Meanwhile, this object was screaming out, Uncle, easy on that point. This flying object was obviously the young Master Jun. Guan Qing Han cried out in alarm, as the body landed on the ground face first. Jun Moxie had just received a kick in the buttocks by his uncle, and even though he had screamed out to complain, he had still managed to adjust his body mid-air very quickly in order to ensure a secure landing position. But unexpectedly, he suddenly found himself crashing into a soft embrace while he was still screaming out. And then suddenly a sweet fragrance entered his nose as he came in contact with something really soft and warm. And then his body's projectile was rebounded and diverted. He couldn't help feeling a sense of pleasurable comfort for a second, but just as he was about to start enjoying it, he found himself falling down. This time, he didn't get enough time to adjust his posture, and ended up falling to the ground in a free-fall position, and ended up bumping his face in the ground. Then without any further explanations, Jun Wu Yi leapt out of the room, and started playing ping-pong with his nephew's body as he fiercely rained an intense volley of kicks and punches, while Guan Qinghan stared on in horror. Guan Qinghan was already aware of Jun Wu Yi's recovery, so without worrying about anything, he simply continued beating up Jun Moxie. With all his skills put in play, Jun Moxie quickly covered his head with one hand, and his crotch with the other, and started rolling around in the ground like a sandbag. He had already accepted his fate and had resigned himself to this beating. Just go a little easy, uncle. Else I'll also end up in a wheelchair like you. Uncle, you. Stop it, please. Don't hit him. Guan Qinghan anxiously went up to him in persuasion. Her remark clearly expressed her anxiety and distress, and Jun Wu Yi involuntarily stopped his hands mid-air in surprise. Even Jun Moxie opened his eyes wide while still lying on the ground. This uncle and nephew duo were clearly in sync, and they both immediately stared blankly at Guan Qinghan in surprise, and then looked at each other, unable to believe her reaction. Since when did Qinghan bother with Moxie's life and death? Is my brother's daughter-in-law possessed? Guan Qinghan suddenly realized that these two men were staring at her out of sheer surprise since she had just charged up to plead in her brother-in-law's favor, a brother-in-law she previously didn't like at all. But why did I just plead to save him? Guan Qinghan's face suddenly turned red, while her ears practically turned purple. And then she suddenly stomped her feet in anger. I was afraid that you'll tire yourself, uncle. Hit him. Hit him again. Kill him for all I care. She finished her sentence almost like a spoilt child throwing a tantrum, and then flushed with embarrassment once again seeing that they were both still staring at her. almost to the point where it seemed that their eyes would pop out of their sockets. She bitterly grunted and then swiftly walked away. Did I misinterpret that? Maybe I just misheard her. Was that person really my sister-in-law? Jun Moxie scratched his head a couple of times as he slowly got up to his feet. Looks like it, yes. Jun Wu Yi's tone also seemed uncertain. Suddenly he got furious again. Who told you that you could stand up? It really feels that you haven't understood it yet. Then he resumed his sandbag training. Jun Wu Yi continued tossing about his arms and legs for a long while until he was completely satisfied with the result. And then said, "Tomorrow, it's your father's death anniversary day. And you will be accompanying me to the family's memorial hall. And then you will light an incense stick in front of your father's cenotaph. Do you understand your responsibilities as the son of this family?" Jun Moxie groaned and then chirped, "Yes." Jun Wu Yi massaged his wrists as he stepped forward and resumed his place in his wheelchair. And then started pushing his wheelchair towards the exit. He turned around as he reached the courtyard's door. The Shui Han Manor, what about them? Not a problem for now. Jun Moxie wanted to cry, but couldn't find his tears. Great. Just great. Looks like beating me up is the only fun activity Uncle looks forward to these days. The sky was still as gloomy the next day. Jun Moxie and Jun Wu Yi were both sitting in a wheelchair of their own, quietly and calmly looking at the cenotaph, which could barely be justified as magnificent. This object was already beyond the scope of being called a cenotaph, and seemed more like as if someone had built a palace in the middle of the barracks. There had already been a very strict and rigorous inspection of the surroundings before Jun Wu Yi's arrival. 8 pillars were standing in support of a dome on top, with 2 large, flat, and smooth boulders facing the center, carrying the following engravings. The left one, "The winds listen to the Jun." The right one, "The heaven and earth belong to the Jun." A fleet of stairs paved the way upwards to the dome, and both sides of each step of this staircase had carvings of soldiers mounted on horsebacks. As they moved forward, there were 8 large life-sized carvings of masculine and burly men, 4 on each side of the central sculpture. Their hands were positioned right next to their hilts, almost as if they'd draw their sword at any moment. And although these were only sculptures, it seemed as if they would come to life in case their master was in danger. These 8 sculptures are dedicated to Big Brother's 8 bodyguards. These 8 men were assigned to protect him at the time he joined the army, and these 8 followed him till the day he died. These 8 men never left Wu Hui's side in danger or otherwise. Jun Wu Yi's eyes were staring at the statues of these 8 people, while the depth of his eyes clearly reflected his appreciation for their loyalty. The tone of his speech was extremely deep and profound, almost as if he was trying to memorize their valor and companionship. This is the glory and honor, whether in life or death, of the White Commander, Jun Wu Yi. Who could ever match his name? Jun Wu Yi slowly spoke as he slowly moved forward while his eyes continued to pay respects to each passing statue. Jun Moxie simple couldn't help but awe at the magnificence of this memorial. The entire mantle was neat and clean, to the point where there wasn't even one speck of dust on in it. It had just rained very heavily a couple of nights ago, and it was late autumn at the moment, but there wasn't even a single dead leaf on this memorial, nor was there any trace of corrosion from the rain. Someone is always placed in charge of taking care of this memorial. In fact, there is an unwritten rule in the barracks: no matter who you are, as long as you're in charge of Big Brother's memorial, and there's even a spot of dust found on it, your only penalty is capital punishment. There will no trial. No explanations will be listened to. There is no law more stringent in the military than this one. There are no exceptions. and no one ever dares to speak against it, nor has anyone ever tried to violate it. Jun Wu Yi slowly spoke as he pushed his wheelchair around. Jun Moxie silently accompanied his uncle in his wheelchair, but his heart had already started shaking with admiration. This one point was enough to express the military's love and admiration for his father. It was evident that his father, Jun Wu Yi, the White Commander's reputation had already transcended to that of a god's in the eyes of this country's military men. Under the dome, there was a large, tall, stone statue of a middle-aged man upon his horse. The man's body was upright, his bright and piercing eyes seemingly seeing through all the strategies in play on the battlefield. His left hand was holding the rein of his horse, while his right hand was gently placed on the hilt of his sword which was hanging on his waist. Even the lines of face were clearly sculpted out, while his mouth was curved into a cold and awe-inspiring smile, almost as if he was the overlord of hundreds of millions of people. The cloak in his body's background seemed to be flying in the wind, and although this statue was lifeless in general, but it still faintly revealed the majestic and heroic spirit of Jun Wu Yi's personality. Please subscribe to this channel, so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 199. A real man does not shun his grief. Jun Wu Yi's entire body had been motionless since the moment he had laid eyes on his elder brother's statue, and it seemed as if one statue was staring into the eyes of another. Although the eyes of the living statue was reflecting the emotion of his beating heart. Jun Wu Yi stayed rooted to his spot looking up at the statue, and slowly his eyes started to blur with tears, and finally one of the tears fell down as he stated in a low and hoarse voice, almost as if he was trying to hold back his pain. "Big brother, I've brought Moxie to see you. He's finally progressed enough to be eligible of paying his respects to you." Jun Wu Yi silently and painfully closed his eyes, and it seemed that his mind was already reveling in the memories of the past. He had grown up with his two elder brothers. He had played with them, and from his childhood days to that of his youth, his two elder brothers had always looked after him, but in return he provoked a boundless curse which took the life of his two elder brothers in the prime of their years. Then, his sister-in-law died from the grief of this sorrow, and when her parents arrived to console her and realized that she had already died, they too broke off all contact with the Jun family. These two families, who had once been close allies, never communicated again. Then Jun Wu Yi's nephews died young, also because of his fault. Heaven knows that Jun Wu Yi would have chosen to die 100 deaths before allowing his elder brothers and his nephews to die fighting his battles. This past decade hadn't been enough to rid his heart of his pain. This pain was still smoldering at the bottom of his heart even now. The scenes of his past had started flashing through his mind in the face of his elder brother's vivid and lifelike statue. And Jun Wu Yi's mind had already fallen into a bottomless abyss of pain, infinite regrets, and boundless hate. Real men don't cry, not unless they've really been hurt. "Big brother." Jun Wu Yi fell down to his knees on the ground ahead, and the strong and durable body of this valiant general started to tremble. "I'm sorry. I've let you down. I've let second brother down. I've let father down. And I've let our family down." Through his tear-stained eyes, Jun Wu Yi gazed into the fortitude and wisdom of elder brother's face, and he felt as if his elder brother had come back from the dead to stroke his hair, and then looked at him with a smile on his face, almost as if he was teaching him a lesson. "Third brother, there's no need to suffer. There's no need to cry." At this moment, Jun Wu Yi started crying even more loudly as all those feelings which had been taking refuge in his heart for these past 10 years started to pour out unrestrained. And then he started crawling closer to his elder brother's grave like an aggrieved child who was suddenly throwing himself into the arms of his loved ones. He could still distinctly remember the last words his brother had said to him the night before his departure all those years ago, about this Silver Blizzard City matter. I've always felt that our business with them isn't over yet. And I'm afraid that the Silver Blizzard City still has some secret tricks up their sleeve. Therefore, when your second brother and I are away from home, you will not act recklessly. You mustn't get over anxious about marrying Miss Han. Love always finds a way. Once your second brother and I return, we will talk to father. And then we'll find a way to help you. The whole family will stand in your support. Jun Wu Yi could clearly remember the concern in his eldest brother's eyes and a similar look in the eyes of his second brother as well. The image of those profound and concerned eyes was piercing his heart with pain. Almost as if someone had stabbing his heart with a knife and was twisting the knife inside his heart. At that time, his two elder brothers had completely forgotten about their own pains and worries for the sake of their little brother. Those two men were only concerned about their little brother's safety, and were worried that their little brother might end up hurting himself under the flame of impulse, and had seemingly forgotten all about the enemies they would have to deal with. These two men were wise and loving enough to spare their little brother by not sharing their anxieties since they didn't wish to worry him any further. Then, a loud and forceful drumming had started sounding, loud enough to make the entire world shake. Jun Wu Yi was standing in his military uniform, his white military uniform, and the next moment he was mounting his horse. Third brother, now that your second brother and I are going away, you are the only man the Jun family can depending on. Big brother. Big brother, ah. Why did you say that? How stupid was your little brother? Ah. I had never been able to understand the meaning behind your words until this day. Those were your last words. Big brother. Did you already know this then? What did you know about? Perhaps you had sensed something. Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you tell me? You knew that I would have chosen to die before sending my own brothers to the gates of ruin, ah. If I ever get a change to return to that time a decade ago, when I hadn't met her, I would go back and do it all differently. I would. I would. Third uncle. Jun Moxie stepped out of his wheelchair. The dead are dead. Accept fate. And shun your grief. Looking after your own self is the correct way ahead. Jun Wu Yi slowly raised his head and looked at Jun Moxie as his face suddenly revealed a sorrowful smile. Moxie. Someone had once spoken these words to your father several years ago. Accept fate and shun your grief so you may be able to look after yourself. Do you know what he said in reply? What did my father say? All three of us had fought in that battle together, and we had suffered heavy losses. Your father was very sad to see so many of our men lying dead. At that time, one of the officers advised him, General, shun your grief. Take control of your body and emotions. Jun Wu Yi spoke slowly as he recalled the words. At that time, Big Brother had replied, why do you want me to shun my grief? Why should I shun my grief? My brothers have died, and they were killed by my enemy. Shouldn't I now kill the enemy? How will letting go of my grief change anything? Taking control over my emotions. Jun Wu Yi raised his voice, almost as if he was trying to imitate his elder brother. Yes, we will have to find a way to shun this grief in time, but I will not waste this grief in tears. I will use it to kill the enemy. I will use this grief to raid my enemy and then eliminate them in one swoop so my brethren never have to feel this grief again. I will not shun my grief. I will change my circumstances. I will not shun my grief. I will change my circumstances. Jun Moxie softly repeated these two phrases, and suddenly a wave current rushed through his body, flooding his body with pride and honor as it resonated throughout his soul. I will not shun my grief. I will change my circumstances. This one sentence aroused a sincere and earnest feeling of admiration for his father inside Jun Moxie's heart. A father he had never even met. An iron-blooded man laughs when he feels like laughing, cries when he feels like crying. An iron-blooded man isn't artificial. A real man doesn't shun his sorrows. A real man works on transforming his situation. His words have won over my heart. Jun Moxie could suddenly feel that even in his previous life, he would have easily accepted such a man to be his father. Even though this man has only fathered this body I live in and not my soul, I will accept him as my father in this life. I would accept such a man as my father in any life. The uncle and nephew duo sat motionlessly and quietly like stationary, and neither man spoke up for a long time. Suddenly, a round of rapid footsteps sounded outside. These footsteps proceeded to the door and opened it. And then a voice announced, "Third General. The Yutang Empire's General Zhao Jianhun wishes to pay his respects to the commander. General, please give me my orders." Zhao Jianhun. Jun Wu Yi seemed rather confused since he had never imagined that the enemy of his brothers would actually turn up here. "Ask him to come in. I've been longing to meet him. It's been a while since I've met my old friend." "Yes, General," the young military officer accepted his orders, and then walked away. A little while later, a black silhouette slowly appeared at a distance. This man was abnormally tall, and was wearing black cloak, black robes. Even his face was black, and it seemed as if this person's entire body was made of cold black steel. His strides were as dominating as a tiger's, and he was looking straight ahead, and nowhere else. The Tianxiang military soldiers, who were lined up on both sides of the walkway, were eyeing him with hostility, but he didn't seem to be paying any attention to them. This person was tall and thin, had broad shoulders, long arms, a high nose, and sharp eyes. The lines on his face were so rigid that it almost seemed as if someone had carved them out with a knife. An awe-inspiring aura of war was surging out from his body as he continued to proceed forward, never looking to his side, nor looking to his back. This man had turned up alone. He had ventured into the enemy's army camp to pay his respects to his dead enemy. All by himself. This man was Zhao Jianhun. Bold beyond words could describe. Bold and valiant enough to be one of the most decorated generals of the Yutang Empire. Zhao Jianhun walked closer and stationed himself in front of Jun Wu Yi. "Jun Wu Yi, we meet again after all these years." His sonorous and powerful voice still inhibited a cry for battle. Jun Wu Yi didn't look back at him, and kept his eyes lowered to the ground. "Zhao Jianhun, I've been wanting to see you for a long time. A really long time." "Then why didn't you? There hasn't been a Jun on the battlefield for a decade now." Zhao Jianhun's voice seemed authentic. "I've gotten very lonely. If there had been a Jun over this past decade, then I'm afraid that you wouldn't have gotten his opportunity to stand in front of me and complain." Jun Wu Yi looked coldly at him, "Because you would have already been reincarnated." Even though this sentence was rather arrogant in its make, Zhao Jianhun could clearly tell from its tone that speaker was obviously harboring a feeling of regret, which affirmed him that only the Jun were worthy of being his true opponents. However, even though he clearly understood the true meaning behind Jun Wu Yi's words, but that sense of a military man's honor inwardly still incited a feeling of waging a fight at this moment. "Yes. Had you been over this past decade, then maybe I would have found myself buried in the ground. But you were not there." "Why weren't you there?" Zhao Jianhun actually seemed a bit angry. The tone of this famous Yutang general left Jun Wu Yi puzzled, while Jun Moxie was left scratching his head. "This isn't a fake, right? although he won the war under dubious circumstances. But he's the only general who's ever defeated the White Commander, Jun Wu Yi, in battle, and the only man Jun Wu Yi was never able to defeat. In addition to facing all the three brothers of the Jun family for years at a stretch, he also managed to see two of them fall, and the third one getting crippled. He knows well that third uncle wouldn't have been able to fight him after his injury, but this guy still wants to fight and defeat him? Has this guy lost his mind? Zhao Jianhan walked over to Jun Wu Yi's statue and came to a halt. He stood there motionlessly for a long while with a serious look on his face, his body perfectly upright, but his eyes were clearly showing the sincerity of his respect. Then, he bent down from his waist, and didn't straighten up for a long while. A while later, he stood up straight once again, and looked sharply in the stone eyes of his enemy, but with a look of admiration in his own. He sighed and said, "Jun Wu Yi, do you know something? Zhao Jianhan joined the military at a young age, and I've spent half a lifetime fighting many great generals. I've lost and I've won against some of the most decorated heroes of this world. But only one man has ever been capable of arousing a sense of admiration in Zhao Jianhan's heart. There is only one man I bow down to. That man's name is Jun Wu Yi." Please subscribe to this channel, so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 200. The Characteristics of Pride. Zhao Jianhan was staring at the statue of his enemy with the utmost respect in his eyes. Jun Wu Yi and I have faced each other on the battlefield a total of 29 times, and regardless of my wits or strength, I've always lost. No matter my attack strategy, no matter my calculations, no matter my ambush plans, no matter the secrecy of operation, Jun Wu Yi would always see through everything. The White Commander could see through everything. Such words were probably the best and biggest compliment an enemy can ever be capable of giving a man. Jun Wu Yi had nothing to add in this regard, but these words brought back the memories of his eldest brother, and his heart suddenly burst with pride once again. The young Master Jun had been silently watching Zhao Jianhan the entire time, and could feel a strong sense of regret in the man's tone for not being able to defeat the great commander. However, no matter how miserably the man was beaten in battle, he'd still rally his forces once again, and would rise up once again to wage 100 more wars. This was an amazing characteristic that this general possessed, and Jun Moxie could sense that this man was someone to reckon with. Our countries were at war with each other at that time, and although Jun Wu Yi and I met several times, but we always met on the battlefield in the form of sworn enemies. I always hoped that one day I'd be able to meet this valiant and terrifying enemy in person, so I could share a glass of wine with him over a conversation. And that one moment would have been enough for me to last a lifetime. Zhao Jianhan seemed to be talking out of sentiment at this point. However, the greatest desire of my life had always been to defeat Jun Wu Yi in battle once, and convincingly at that. Then I would have chopped his head with my own sword, and then I would have personally buried the man with all honors. Therefore, no matter how miserably he defeated me, no matter how desperate he made me, I would always struggle to get back on my feet because I believed in my dream. I would always get up again, so I could beat this unshakable enemy of mine. I would have lost 100 more battles, but I would still fight again. The death of such an ingenious general under such shady conditions is indeed the most tragic thing I can ever imagine. The mystery of his tragic death? Jun Wu Yi suddenly opened his eyes and looked at him coldly. "Zhao Jianhan, what are you trying to say? What do you know about it?" The mysterious deaths of his two elder brothers and his two nephews could be described as the biggest puzzle of Jun Wu Yi's life. And although he believed that the Silver Blizzard City played a part in it, but he still didn't have any proof of it. Jun Wu Yi had been anxiously trying to get some concrete evidence. And suddenly it seemed to him that Zhao Jianhan knew something about it. Zhao Jianhan turned around and looked at him. What do I know? I'm an enemy soldier. So even if I told you something, why would you ever trust me? Jun Wu Yi. Although you've beaten me as well. But I've never respected you. Zhao Jianhan has only ever admired one enemy. Jun Wu Yi. If Jun Wu Yi wasn't already dead, then I'd want to kill him. However, he died battling me, but under the most dubious of circumstances, and I, Zhao Jianhan, will not take the blame of it. Nor do I know anything about his death. I was supposed to have been defeated by Jun Wu Yi 10 years ago. But unfortunately I defeated him. And then he died. This victory was the biggest defeat of my life. And this defeat was the final one. Zhao Jianhan smiled mischievously. But with abundant traces of sadness on his face, that victory is the biggest irony of my life. At this moment, Jun Wu Yi finally started to understand the true meaning behind Zhao Jianhan's words, and muttered to himself, so, he also wants to know the truth. Zhao Jianhan looked at him coldly. Had I really defeated and killed him, then I would have proudly announced it to the whole wide world. And then I would have celebrated like you've never seen anyone celebrate before. That victory was marked as the biggest achievement of my life. But it was false. This feat does not belong to me, but it is still hung against my name. And this, for Zhao Jianhan, is the biggest shame. A shame I simply cannot wash away. I cannot stand it. And so I wish to avenge him. Jun Wu Yi was a real soldier. And he should have died fighting on the battlefield. Not under a conspiracy. I cannot accept this result. And I believe that he wouldn't have accepted it either. You're his brother. Something must have rubbed off on you as well. Zhao Jianhan smiled mockingly. You're a soldier too, aren't you? If such a success was handed over to you by someone else, then what you have done? You're a soldier, aren't you? Would you have taken it? Perhaps. Some people would secretly celebrate it. But I, Zhao Jianhan, cannot. Jun Wu Yi had no words to offer. Jun Wu Yi, I ask you. How did Jun Wu Yi die? How were you defeated? Zhao Jianhan was almost glaring at Jun Wu Yi. Tell me, and tell me the truth. The truth. Jun Wu Yi shook his head as his face twitched. I would also like to know the truth. By the virtue of being one of the most prominent generals of the Yutang Empire, Zhao Jianhan was surely capable of calling the winds and summoning the rains. But in the face of a power like the Silver Blizzard City, he was no more than a mere ant. Even though Jun Wu Yi didn't want an enemy like Zhao Jianhan to exist in this world. But just as Zhao Jianhan, Jun Wu Yi also firmly believed that the bones of a soldier belonged in the battlefield. Although he wished Zhao Jianhan dead, he only wanted the man to die in battle, and preferably by his own hands. In any case, he didn't wish for Zhao Jianhan to fight the Silver Blizzard City in order to avenge Jun Wu Yi and then end up dying under similarly dubious circumstances. In reality, even Jun Wu Yi was also only vaguely conjecturing at the truth since he didn't have any proof of the Silver Blizzard City's involvement. Either way, he wouldn't imply his own hatred and impose his own battles on someone else. You would never be able to deal with them. You weren't even able to deal with my eldest brother, or my second brother, or even me. Jun Wu Yi replied coldly, Zhao Jianhan, you shouldn't overestimate your abilities. Although I hope that you die soon enough. But I don't wish for you to die the death my brothers did. The bones of a soldier have always belonged on the battlefield. So you already know how the three of you were beaten, and that I have no relation with what happened. Zhao Jianhun seemed rather excited about it. Of course. You may be worthy of being the most important general of the Yutang Empire, but you simply aren't capable of defeating the Jun brothers. Jun Wu Yi grunted, you just don't have what it takes. Thank you. Thank you, even though Jun Wu Yi was belittling him. Zhao Jianhun seemed very happy, grateful, and excited. Jun Wu Yi, you may be a victorious general, but you will never know what the burden of these victories can do to a man. I've never lost any battle in this past decade. I may get hit hard, but I'd always counter and win the battle, but since I wasn't able to defeat the Jun brother convincingly, no matter where I go, I can always feel as if someone is pointing at my back and saying, you see that man? He's a lucky one. No matter how badly he loses, he'll always win in the end because he's a lucky general. Luck is his biggest strength. This is the biggest humiliation for any soldier. A real soldier never believes in luck. Strength is everything. Zhao Jianhun's voice started turning up, and he was almost roaring at this point. But hysterically so, I don't have the strength to win. I've never lost a war in 10 years now. No matter how hard I'm hit, I always counter and I always win in the end. Why should anyone call me lucky? I would rather be dead before I accept my victories as a twist of fate. Jun Moxie had been watching Zhao Jianhun since the moment he had come in, and could sense that this man was true soldier. Hearing these words only made him sure of it. Perhaps Jun Moxie wouldn't agree with the pedantic thoughts and ideals of the man, but he couldn't help admire them, and therefore, he couldn't approve of them. He is a true soldier. A truly iron-blooded military man. Upright and straightforward. Real men and true swords don't believe in luck. And then don't believe in destiny. Even if they face death, they do so standing on their feet. They may die, but they always die in battle. They die with a forward posture, defending their pride and their national dignity, like an immortal and great wall, unwilling to move aside for the sake of their future generations and their country. This unique prideful characteristics of a true soldier was vividly visible to Jun Moxie in the words and body language of Jun Wu Yi and Zhao Jianhun. Whether friend or foe, such soldiers are worthy of admiration. He could sense that even if another general is able to match up to Zhao Jianhun's track record in the days to come, the said man would unlikely ever be able to match this general's valor and ideals. Jun Wu Yi and Zhao Jianhun, two men who were once enemies, continued to talk in front of Jun Wu Yi's cenotaph for a long time, and even though they matched each other measure for measure, but a tone of sympathy and respect still lingered abundantly in their body language. Jun Moxie didn't interrupt them at all since he knew that this moment belonged to these two men, and these two men alone. These two war veterans. These two opponents. These two iron-blooded soldiers. Towards the end, intentionally or otherwise, Zhao Jianhun uttered a sentence which aroused Jun Moxie's interest. There is another military family in the Tianxiang country apart from the Jun family, the donghua family. Things are looking a bit fishy on their end. What are you trying to say? Jun Wu Yi asked. What news have you come across, Brother Zhao? Is the country turning against us? Is the country turning against you? Zhao Jianhun smiled mischievously. I came here with the state teacher of the Yutang Empire, and your three princes have already visited us. And haha. Their attitude is very, haha. Zhao Jianhun was standing upright at this moment, and his deep voice seemed to be sneering at Jun Wu Yi. The three princes have been trying to disintegrate the empire, but your emperor has his heart set on maintaining the balance and unity. However, it seems that the three princes are getting very impatient, and cannot wait for their succession any longer, which makes mutiny their only option. The Jun family and the Donghua family are extremely loyal to Yang Huayu, which makes your two families their biggest hurdle, and they need to clear them at any cost. The Donghua family has an unmarried daughter, and she can be used as a very significant bargaining chip here. And in case one of the three princes is somehow able to woo her, even if a Jun is able to marry the princess, it will only be done by the grace of His Majesty, and will by no means obstruct the plans of the three princes. Jun Wu Yi looked downwards. Is that so? This story will be continued to chapter 201. For those of you who are not subscribed yet, please subscribe. The interesting and best stories will be updated. See you again in the next episode.